This is a video tutorial for working with Fusion tables, and it's an introduction to Google Drive and working in tabular format to create a map. And we're going to be mapping latitude and longitude for world cities. And we need to do this, we need to keep in mind what latitude and longitude is. And that latitude and longitude is, we can see on my notepad up here, latitude is the y-axis. And it has a possible 90 degrees, a plus and a minus, and longitude is our x-axis, and that has a possible essentially 360 degrees. So it has 0 to 180 as a positive, and then it has 180 to 0 as a negative. And as long as we keep that in mind, we can break our latitude longitude into basically quadrants, into 4 sections of the Earth. So if we're looking at, say, Google Maps here, and we scroll out a little bit, we can break this mapping space into X and a Y in 4 quadrants. And to do that, it would look something like this screen grab right here. So we can see that on my Y-axis I have 0 to 90 in the plus column, and 0 to minus 90 negative column, north and south on the latitude. And in terms of longitude, starting at Greenwich Prime Meridian, I can go 180 positive, and then on the backside, quote, the backside of the Earth, I can go minus 180 back to 0. So any pairing of latitude and longitude will give us a point on the face of the Earth, and those points can be very precise based on the amount of decimal digits we actually have in our latitude-longitude pairing. So what we want to do is we have a bunch of points that have latitude and longitude for cities, but they haven't been categorized into these quadrants. So what we can do is we can call our quadrant here up in the upper left-hand corner, we can call that our northwest section. And then we can also have a northeast section, which covers a good portion of Europe and also the east. We can have down in South America, we can have a southwest quadrant and then a southeast quadrant for Australia and Indonesia. So that's what we want to do. We want to accomplish giving a new category to our cities, our city points, based on these 4 quadrants. For this lab, this assignment, we're going to have a part 1, a part 2, part 3, part 4, and a part 5. And for part 1, we're essentially going to be importing our tabular data into Google Drive. Once it's in Google Drive, we're going to be applying some filters. And these filters are based on 4 conditions. A latitude that's greater than or equal to 0, and a longitude that's less than or equal to 0. And these 4 conditions all result in a northwest, so NW, SW, NE, southeast, SE. And we'll also apply for each one of those a 1, 2, 3, and 4, because when we're mapping with a Google Fusion table, which I'll explain in a bit, it wants to see quantitative numbers as opposed to text to symbolize the map into a legend. So once we actually do our tabular data in Google Drive, then we're going to go to importing that data into what's called Fusion Tables. And Fusion Tables is an experimental app that Google has developed. It's been around for a while, and what's really good about it is that it will take latitude and longitude and quickly create the correct location for those particular points based on that lat-long pair. So once we have it mapped in Fusion Tables, then what we can do is we can go ahead in our part 3, we can create the map. And in part 4, we're going to actually do some symbolization based on our 1, 2, 3, 4 values that we create. And finally, we'll simply save the map in Fusion Tables and then share that as an interactive map. We'll actually have a unique address that will allow you to go ahead and share out that map. So 5 parts, and we should be able to get through that based on those stages. Okay, so I'm going to close this down for right now, and we're going to be using data that comes from the Atlas of Urban Expansion, and this is a project with some researchers at New York University, and it's housed here at Lincoln Institute for Land Policy, and it's basically very large cities. We have 3,646 cities in this data set, and we can download the Excel spreadsheet. And I'll have the address here for you. It's at the Lincoln Land site. So I've downloaded the it's called Universe of Cities data, and it's sitting here on my desktop. So it's right there. It's in an Excel document format. But instead of working in Excel, really what I want to do is just be in a Google Drive sheet setting. And to do that, what I need to do is be in a Gmail account. So inside your actual Gmail account, of course, you have your inbox and whatnot. And this is an account that I just use for tutorials, so I don't have any email per se. But what's important here is over on the right-hand side, up top or right, you have Google Apps, and you can click on that, and then you can go into your drive. So let's go into the drive. Once I'm in the drive, I can go ahead and upload things to my drive. It can be all types of different documents. And I'm just going to do a right click, and in this case what I want to do is I want to upload a file. So I click on Upload Files, and I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm just going to upload my Universe of Cities data. So it comes into Google Drive, and it has this big X right here, and we're going to go ahead and open that up. So let's go ahead and say well, actually, if we double click it, it'll open up as an image. That's not what we want to do. We want to be able to work with it. So let's go back here. I'll do a right click and I'll say Open with Google Sheets. So once I'm in Google Sheets, I basically have a tabular data working instance that I can utilize here. And so let's take a look at our data. So we have the records should be a little bit more than 3,000. So if I scroll down here to the bottom, I have 3,647 cities, it looks like. And on the first column, I have a city ID, a city name, a country, a region, its population. So these are large cities, relatively large cities. It tells me how big this city is in terms of hectares. And then I have a latitude and longitude pairing. And it can tell me distance from oceans also. So everything in here is very valuable attribute data to understand these cities, but what we are concerned with in terms of the locational capacity of this particular tabular data is the latitude longitude. That's the key pairing that we really need to get a precision. We could map on the city name, and Fusion tables would probably recognize those city names very well. But to get even more precise, we really want to use our latitude and longitude. And as long as the decimal points within that lat-long pair are somewhat precise, and here I can see that they're precise within 3 digits. I would like them to be a little bit more precise to get really exact, but this is good enough to put the point down within the basic area of the city. Okay, so what I want to do to get started here is I want to hide these last 2 columns here. So L through N, I just want to hide those so I don't have them. I'm going to be working over here to the right, so I want to go ahead and hide those just so I have a nice clean space next to latitude and longitude. So I'm going to hide columns L through N, and that's going to bring me to an O column here. And in my O column, this is where I'm actually going to create some new data based on some filters that we're going to apply. So for this column, we're going to call this our quad. So we're going to be putting northwest, southwest, northeast, and southeast in this particular column. So I'm going to call this, let's call this quad, Q-U-A-D. And we're going to populate this quad column based on conditions that happen within latitude and longitude here. So in latitude and longitude, what I want to do is go ahead and click on both these columns, And I want to be able to apply filters to these columns now. To do that now, I need to go over here to Data, and I want to say Filter. And so we can see what happens when I do that is I'm going to get these little down arrows here. And none of my other columns have those down arrows because I'm not filtering on that data off to the left-hand side there. I'm only using latitude and longitude here. So now what I need to do is I need to filter based on latitude and longitude to make conditions that equal northwest, southwest, northeast, and southeast in terms of our larger lat-long grid. Okay, so the first condition that I want to meet is I want to have latitude that is going to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so we're going to click on our little down button for latitude, and I'm going to filter by a condition. So here I'm going to say it is greater than or equal to, and I'm going to put my value in here is 0, and I'll say OK. And we can see if we scroll through it here that everything is going to be a positive number into my latitude longitude column. And some of them are very positive. Let's see if we can scroll through and find some smaller values. Here's some 8s, some 6s. So some are very close, others are larger. So that's my positive latitudes. Now my next condition that I need to meet is my longitude has to be less than 0. So I'm going to come over here into my longitude column. I'm going to filter by that condition of it has to be less than 0. So instead of less than or equal to in this case, I just need it to be less than 0. So we're going to click less than 0 and say OK. And so now what I have is I have latitude-longitude pairings where they're positive in the latitude and they're minus in the longitude. And those are all going to equal my northwest setting. So this is all going to be North America, where my essentially a lot of my US cities will fall within this condition. So I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top here. And in my quad setting, I've got to make sure I get right to the top. I'm going to go ahead and just type in NW. Okay, so I have one cell, and if you want to, you can drag it down all the way to the bottom. The other option is just scroll all the way to the bottom of this particular filter condition and hit a, well actually let's go back, let's make sure we have that cell copied. So we're going to copy it, go Control C. And then I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom here, and I'm going to click on this guy and hit Shift. And I'm going to get Control V. It puts it there, but I didn't get all my cells. So I'm going to go back up here and do Control C, and then I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to do a Shift. Okay, so now I have it all activated, and I'm going to go ahead and go Control V. Okay, so these guys are all now northwest, so I have that. Now there's one other thing I need to do. I need to actually create a symbol in my mapping, so and that needs to be a number. So we're just going to apply a 1, 2, 3, 4 to each one of these conditions. So in this case, I'm just going to make a new column here, and I'm going to call it SYM. And this condition, northwest, we're going to call that number 1. So I'm going to go right up here to the top, and I'm going to make him a 1. And then I'm going to do the same thing over again. I'm going to Control C to copy. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to shift that, and then I'm going to go Control V for everybody. So now I have a 1 for each one of my conditions that has been met. Okay, great. So now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and release these filters. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to actually let's go back up and turn off the filters under Data. So my filters are off now. And we can see under symbol that I'm getting some of my values are in and then other ones are not. That's exactly how it should be. Okay, so my next condition is going to be latitude is less than or equal to 0. So we're going to click on these guys again. Need the whole column. And I'm going to go to Data, Filter. Okay, so those are filter columns now. So my first condition is going to be latitude. And the first condition is going to be latitude is less than or equal to 0. So it's going to be less than or equal to 0. I'll say OK. Second condition for longitude is going to be longitude is less than 0. And say OK. So these, now I have latitude and longitude is minus minus. Go all the way to the top here. And in this case, my quad is going to be southwest. So this is going to be basically South America. Countries that fall into that quad that we're going to be calling the southwest quad. So I'll put southwest. Okay. Copy him out. Go all the way down to the bottom. And shift and copy paste. Okay. Then we're going to go to symbol. And this is going to be my 2's. So here I'm going to put a 2. I'm going to go copy. Go all the way down to the bottom. Paste him. So now I got all my 2's in. I'm going to go back to data. I'm going to turn off my filters and get back to my original data condition. Then I'm going to once again click on latitude, longitude here. And I'm going to data, I'm going to filter. Now we're meeting our third condition. So our third condition now is going to be latitude is greater than or equal. So latitude, filter condition, is going to be greater than or equal to 0. And the longitude is going to be greater than or equal to 0. Or let's just say greater than 0. Greater than 0. Say OK. So these are going to be plus pluses. And in my plus plus, what I'm going to be getting is my northeast condition. Okay, so my quad's going to be in E here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy him, Control C. I'm going to go down to the bottom. Didn't shift him, Control C, and I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to not getting it here. Let's see, shift. There we go. And then Control V. So that's my northeast condition. And this is going to be number 3. Okay, so under symbol, I do a Control C. And then I'm going to do shift all the way down to the bottom. That gives me my third symbol. I'm going to go data, turn off filter. Okay. And then we're going to check, make sure that we're doing good here. Good. So we just have a few left at this point in time. So we just need to apply our fourth condition. So we're going to go to data, and we're going to make sure that we're clicked on latitude, longitude. And here we're going to go ahead and go to data and filter the last condition. So in this case, it's going to be latitude is less than or equal to 0. So here it's going to be less than or equal to 0. And our longitude is now going to be greater than 0. 0, and say OK. So these guys are now going to be in the southeast quadrant. So SE. And southeast is going to be Australia and Indonesia. So we'll do a Control-C here, and then Shift, go down to the bottom, Control-V, Southeast. And we're going to go to our symbol. This is going to be number 4. So number 4, Control-C, then we're going to do Shift all the way down to the bottom, Control-V, and we are almost done here. So we're going to data, turn off the filter. That's going to give us all our records back. Okay, so we should have the full records, and each one of these now has a value. So we got a bunch of 3s. We can see that we got some 1s coming up. There's our 2s. So all of these have been coded 1, 2, 3, 4 to correspond to their quad: northeast, northwest, southwest, southeast. Okay, so basically our data is done now. We can go ahead and start to map this data. So we're not going to map it within a sheet setting. We actually need a utility called Fusion Tables. And if I go back to my drive, let me get into my drive here. I'm going to see 2 sheets now. I have the Google Sheets, and then I have the original import here. This is the one that we worked on, so we just need to make sure that we're using the one that we worked on. And to activate Google Fusion Tables, you can do a couple things. You can simply search for it. So if I go to Google Fusion Tables, it's going to come up. This is what it looks like when it comes up. The other option is you can actually enable Google Fusion within your drive. So let me click off these guys, and I'm going to get back into my drive. I can actually enable it from my actual drive. So I'll just do a right click, and if I want to connect to the app, you can see I'm connected to 3 things right now. I can connect to more apps. And here I would go ahead and just search for the apps based on its name. So it's going to be Fusion Tables. And this is it right here. So I would connect to this. I'm going to take off the default because I don't want it to always open within Google Fusion Tables. And I'd say OK. And here, now what I'll be able to do is do a right click on the table itself, and I should be able to see. It doesn't seem to want to do it for me. Not sure why that is. Let's just go ahead and click outside of it and do a right click and go to More, Google Fusion Tables. Okay. So at this point I basically need to import that particular Google Sheet. And the way that I can do that is I can either choose the file location, say from the desktop, but if you have it within your Google Drive, it's going to show up as a sheet. So I'm going to click on Google Spreadsheets, and it sees it now. It sees that particular sheet that we just worked on called Universe of Cities. And I'm going to click on that and just say Select. And it says, am I authorized to do this? And you would say, yes, that's okay. And as it brings it into the table format, it's actually going to look at the latitude and longitude, and it's going to process that into an actual mapping instance. And what's happening in the background here is that Fusion Tables can do a process called geocoding, and it's basically looking at a latitude-longitude pair or an address and translating that into a location on a map. That's what's taking place. And that's a pretty complex process to do that, but luckily there's a lot of programs that allow us, including GIS, to do that step. So now I can click Next, and I'll just leave the table name what it is. If you want to work with some of these descriptions, that's fine, but it's not really necessary. Then go ahead and say Finish. And there's a key condition here that needs to be met now, is you want to make sure that as you're doing this, that it's mapping to the latitudes. So it's basically, it's recognizing, although it just says latitude, it's recognizing latitude and longitude. Sometimes it will recognize just the country, or right. So you may see a yellow showing up here for just the country. If that's the case, that's not accurate enough. You need to actually make it push towards map of latitude. So you need to make sure that you have a map of latitude here. So if I click on the latitude tab, it'll take a second for it to populate. But basically, here's all my points now. So if we zoom in, all these particular cities are essentially in the right location based on the latitude-longitude pairing. So let's go to New York here. And we can see that our point is kind of sitting out here. It looks like it's actually in the bay. But as far as we're concerned, it's in the New York City region within the 5 boroughs. So based on the lat-long pairing of 3 decimal points of 32.7 plus, or I'm sorry, latitude of 40.842, based on that latitude pairing there, it's pretty close to what we need it to be. If we wanted to get to an actual neighborhood in the Bronx or Manhattan or actual city address, we would need to have that precision much greater, but that's okay for what we're doing. We're mapping at a very small scale, so we just need to have these points within a pretty close location to their city. Okay, so now that we have these points that look like they're pretty much correct, they're all red points, and what we want to do is we want to actually symbolize all the work that we did in our tabular format. And to do that, we need to go to, let's take a look at our rows real fast. So if we click on rows, this is looking at the tabular structure. And we can see now that under the tabular structure, we have our quad name, original ID. We have all our original data, but we have all our new work that we did also over here on the right-hand side. So that's what we're actually going to be mapping to. So if I go back to map of latitude, I want to go down to change feature styles. And under change feature styles, we're going to be using, in this case, we're going to use buckets. And we're going to be dividing it into 4 different buckets. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, and I need to make sure that my column now is going to be under symbol. Okay, so let's use this range, 1 to 4. So anything that's in ones is going to be yellow, green, purple, red. So I'm going to change these around a little bit. So the first condition for 1, I believe, is going to be our northwest, so North America. Let's make that, we'll make that small blue. You can change your colors around however you want to. Number 2 condition, I think, is southwest, so let's call that, that's going to be red for South America. And then for our northeast condition, let's have greens. And then down in Australia, let's have, say, yellows, and we'll say save. Okay, so now we can actually see our quadrants here. Even though we can't see the actual line itself, we can see where the division is between these points. So if we look at these 2 points, so this one right here for Accra is, its latitude is 5.6. This guy is a latitude of 6.1, but its longitude, one's sitting on the side of the meridian in positive territory and the other one's in minus territory. So that's where kind of where our break is. And if we zoom out, we can probably put our cursor right over United Kingdom, and we can see right there is basically that prime meridian running down. Now if we go to where the equator is, we're going to see that cut right here. Actually, we can see the line. There's the line right there. So everything that's underneath is going to be yellows and reds. Everything above in terms of latitude is going to be either purples and greens. And sometimes it looks like some of these are right on the line, like this one's very close to the equator. So once I'm complete with all my tabular data and everything looks correct on my map here in terms of our quad segments, then what we want to do is we want to actually publish this particular map. So we can do that with relative ease by creating a small HTML document, and when you submit it to course management, either Blackboard or Canvas, you just need to put that into a zip folder, and I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go up to our map. So not the rows, we're not going to actually do the table, we're just going to submit the map. So here we click on the map and we go to Publish. Under Publish, if you have this highlighted yellow and it says it says private and it will not be visible, you need to change that. So we're going to change it to visibility, otherwise it won't be seen on the web. And instead of it being private, we want to change this to being public on the web. Not just anyone with a link, but public on the web. So we click on that and we say save. So that particular address now for the Fusion table is completely accessible by anybody that has the link, and we say done. Now we're going to go back up and we're going to publish it again, and we can see that I don't have that warning. Now what I can do is I can get HTML and JavaScript, so that's going to give me the code to actually show the map in interactive format. But before I do that, I want to make it a little bit bigger than width 500 pixels by 300. So in this case, let's make the width be 800. And our height, we can have our height be something like 600, so that it's a little bit bigger. And I'm going to click on Get HTML and JavaScript. That brings me to this little console, and we can see our height here is 600 and our width is also 800. Now the trick here is that you just want to click once and it'll copy all your code, and then you're just going to do a Control-C to copy that code. And you can just put it into a little text document. I'm using Notepad here. So copy V. So there's all my code right here for this particular map. So I have all my JavaScript, and it says it's an HTML document. So in this case, what I need to do now is I need to save it, and we're going to save by our last name.html. So I'm going to put in my last name, which is Metts, M-E-T-T-S, .html, and I'm going to save it. It's going to save on the desktop there, and let's take a look. So it's sitting right here as a little HTML document. Now what I can do is I can preview it. So let's go into our browser here and just drop it into the top tab there at the top, and here's my map. So I got a little HTML with my map, and I have all the interactivity, so I click on a point and I can see all my data behind that particular point. So this is what I want you to send me so I can check your work and make sure that you got everything correct. And before you do this, though, before you send it to course management, you just need to do a right click on it, and you'll either have 7-zip to compress, or you can simply just go send to a compressed zip folder. And what that's going to allow, it's just going to allow a little folder here that will easily submit to a course management software. And you can see it's super small. It's 1.11 KB, so it'll go really fast, but the little zip folder will protect your HTML document. So that's mapping these latitude-longitude points based on a quad symbolization that we've put together. And this whole project that we've done, this whole assignment, relates to the notion of latitude and longitude and the pairing of those two numbers based on plus plus, plus minus, minus minus, minus plus to get to different quads. And as long as we have a latitude-longitude pairing with some precision, we can actually map points, which is a very fundamental spatial data type for GIS analysis. So we're simply mapping points, but points are very important because we can do a lot of analysis later on with our particular points. So this wraps up assignment 1. If you get to this point and actually have it in a zip folder format, you can go ahead and submit that. Best of luck on this.